Hi again, I'm here to talk with you about some beautiful dolls. These are dolls that are going to appear in an auction coming up, and they're from the Mary Lou Brite collection of Shoemakersville, Pennsylvania, a beautiful woman who was one of our Theriault's very early customers dating back to the late 1970s. She was buying some wonderful dolls from us. Now, when it came time to choose what doll to put on the cover of this catalog, I had a really difficult time, and I finally narrowed it down to two choices: a young man and a really heroic woman. I decided to go with a young man because it kind of tied in with other events that will be going on the week that we'll be having the auction. The title of our auction, Miles to Go and Promises to Keep, is inspired by a Robert Frost poem. And that in turn inspired me after I spent a day with Mary Lou Brite, who is now into her late 80s, and who has the energy and pizzazz and the passion and the zeal. I couldn't keep up with the woman the day we were working at her house. And so the Robert Frost poem, which says, I'd like to stop. I'm going through a woods on a snowy night, and I'd really like to take a rest, but I have miles to go and promises to go before I sleep. And that reminded me of Mary Lou Brite, so that's what we named the catalog in her honor. And we chose this wonderful young man to have on the cover because it's particularly fitting that it kind of ties in with other events that will be going on in Nashville during that week, which is the National Convention of Doll Collectors, an organization that should be so well supported by everyone who has an interest in the heritage and preservation of antique dolls. And here is when he originally appeared on the cover of an old doll news magazine in 1969, and here he is. Now, I want to tell you about this because I love this story, and to me, doll collecting is not just about the doll, it's all about the story. So on the inside front cover, they tell about our cover, and here's what they say. He was a German bisque boy purchased by UFDC for presentation to Betty Brink on her retirement as president of our organization in 1969. They were pretty generous. And Betty then described this boy. She said she named him Fred in honor of the Federation of Doll Clubs, or Federation of Doll Clubs. I thought that was a little whimsical. I loved it. His clothing is all original, she says, perhaps not by the manufacturer, but by one owner long ago. His shoes are worn at the toes. His stockings, the old black ribbed, and his herringbone suit with black velvet collar is actually a brown velvet collar. And this is my phrase I love. Freddie is in deadly pursuit about life, liberty, and the pursuit of education. And I thought that so perfectly personified what our doll collecting and what our community of doll friends should all be about. So he earns the cover spot on Miles to Go, Promises to Keep. Now, let's go back to this young man as an actual doll and his history as a doll. He is model 107 from the Cameron Reinhardt art character series that were first introduced in 1909. And in the back of the catalog, we've written an entire article about him, making reference to wonderful research that was done by Marianne and Jürgen Cieslik some years ago into who sculpted these wonderful art character dolls that Cameron Reinhardt produced during that time period. And they actually had tracked down and located, not ancestors, the following generation of the family of Franz Reinhardt, and found that the sculptor had been a gentleman, Professor Lewin Funk, who was a very, very famous sculptor, Berlin sculptor of the time period. He designed this doll for them. He based it upon a statue he had originally done in 1898 of a young boy, and he proposed that to Franz Reinhardt, and he said, what do you think if we made this into a doll? And Franz said, fabulous, let's do it. And it made this absolutely wonderful doll. It was made in 3 sizes only, this being the largest size, and so rare to find that in all my years of cataloging, 3,000 years maybe, no, not that long, I've only had 5. I've only presented 5 of this model in this size. So an absolutely wonderful doll. He was marketed as Carl, and he has this wonderful handsome young lad expression. He's very, very great, and his all-original costume, we don't know who he lived with or where he was from the time he was made in 1909 until 1969, when Betty Brink was presented the doll, and then shortly thereafter, it went to live in the home of Mary Lou Brite, where it has lived until this day. So he has had a very protected life from at least that time period. He deserves the cover of the catalog. Now, completely different, vying for competition to be on the front of the catalog, and I fought for her in my mind for several reasons. Number one, Mary Lou Brite originally acquired this doll from us in 1981. We had it brought into us from original owners, and I will regret to my end of my days that then I didn't pay as much attention as I should to provenance and knowing all of the family background and all. So I have no trace of who originally owned this doll, and slap on my wrist for that or more. At any rate, we do have the doll, and we don't know the maker. It's very, very specifically, I'm sure it is French. It's a lady doll with a lady body, very elegantly slender hands and body, and her expression. It is so, like steadfastly looking into the future. She's gazing at something, and yet she has a sadness that permeates her whole presence. She's absolutely extraordinary. She's wearing a Red Cross uniform of the period of about 1915 to 1920, in that time period. And here's something we have that's interesting. She came with her original certificate for, I'm going to read it to you, for Charlotte Jane Garrison from Kalamazoo, Michigan, who graduated and got her certificate from the Red Cross Nursing Service in May 22nd, 1917, which is about the time this doll was made. And it's quite possible that this doll was presented to Charlotte at the time of her graduation. At any rate, she's definitely wearing the costume of the time. And I wanted to show you something as to going back to who might have made this doll or who inspired it. We all know in 1914 World War I started, but we also don't pay too much attention to the fact that the U.S. never entered that war militarily until 1917, almost at the end of the war. But before that time, it's always the women. The women were there, the Red Cross nurses. Starting in 1915, the Red Cross was sending their women nurses to France and Britain, and they were serving on the front lines in the base hospitals. There were over 1,000 of them stationed there at the time. And Red Cross put out a big, big promotion to try to get more women to go into training so they could go and help. And look at these posters that were done. And then you look at this doll and tell me, is that doll almost a duplicate of the woman presented in this poster? And then another one done by a very famous American illustrator, Harrison Fisher. And again, the same features, reaching out, very, very dramatically done. I love her costume. Technically, looking here, you can see the headband should be over her forehead, but we wanted you to be able to see her face, so we haven't pulled it down correctly. However, look at this. This is great. This little button right here, I serve, that was a commemorative button from 1921, which was the anniversary of the founding of the Red Cross, originally founded by Clara Barton. And anyone who wants to read about a woman who could inspire you, who stood up to things you cannot imagine, read about Clara Barton, and then look at this doll. And one of you lucky people will be able to own this doll and preserve it in your home. It's a fabulous treasure. So she didn't get the cover, but she is lot number 1 in the auction. Now let's get back again to the other side of the table. And we can talk about another favorite of mine in the auction. And this is the extremely rare character, also done by Cameron Reinhardt. And for a second, I'm going to put her side by side with her brother, because this is the Cameron Reinhardt 104 model, and he's the Cameron Reinhardt 107 model. You can see how closely they resemble each other in the type of presentation that was being made, in the quality of the bisque, in their the personality that emanates from them. They're not just another pretty doll. They're highly characterized. This rare model, again, we have only had 2 in all my years of cataloging. We've only had a 104 model come through our hands twice before. This one comes from the original owner, and to make it, I'm going to turn it around so you can see her all the way around. She's absolutely wonderful. And when I get her around to the side, I'm kind of going to pull her hair back a little bit so you can see, and I hope the camera will pick up all of the angular features of her face, because it's so, I mean, this is not just a very simple mold that like with simple planes. This has so many indentations and creases and facial molds like all of us have in our faces. Very, very fine. She came with her original box and was made for the German market, as we can tell, because the original label on the box is in German, not in English, which it would have been if it was destined to be sold in the English market. And she even has a secondary wig which came with her, and I'm not sure which one she was wearing when she was originally sold, but they were both in the box and they're both quite beautiful. And an additional bonnet that was also in the box has come with her. A very, very rare and wonderful doll. Now, the Cameron Reinhardt series was really interesting. Their art character series, a lot of people call them the premiere of them. It was actually, dolls were introduced in 1909 at the Munich Art Fair by Marion Collitz, but other dolls were made, including those by Kathy Cruz, introduced at the same time, and they were all based on the same premise. The doll needs to stop being a pretty, idealized child. Put expression, put art, put movement, make them look like real children. Sad, wistful, happy, gleeful, all of the expressions that children would have. And that's what Cameron Reinhardt set about doing. Many of them sculpted in-house, and others sculpted by Professor Lewin Funk again. And I have 3 here I want to show you. And I wanted to show you these 3 in particular because I want to emphasize to you size. Size matters when it comes to art character dolls. I know a lot of you like to only have little petite dolls you can put in your cabinets. But when you are choosing dolls to put in your art character collection, I will tell you that the larger the doll is, the more expression was gained, was defined in their faces. And Mary Lou Brite recognized that early on, and she sought after the largest size she could find of the art character dolls. Now, the sad part of that is they tend to be very, very rare. There were very few of them made. If you look in Cieslick's, Marianne and Jürgen Cieslick's German doll studies, you'll find the actual size numbers that were made for each model. And sometimes you can find what the quantities were of each, and you'll find of the larger size, there were very few. So when you find a larger one, you not only are getting better expression, but you are getting a really rare doll as well. Now, I have 3 other models from the art character movement here, and I just want you to see how different expressions were achieved with really very little change. All have painted eyes, of course. All have that beautiful quality of bisque. Different kind of costuming, different mohair. They have mohair wigs. In the front, we have the very, very pretty 112, and this is in a more classic petite size that could be found. A very older, to me, almost an older child. This one is a very, very particular favorite. She is just an absolutely stunning doll. She is their 109 model. I want you to see her hair. Wow, that is so beautiful. Her original mohair wig, that's right down to her hips. It's absolutely gorgeous. And when we come back, look at how deep her eyes are set. These are painted eyes, but it's not just like a flat surface. They really have expressive. The eye sockets themselves are so well defined, as well as the creases around the eyes, that's how the character was achieved. I find these when I'm cataloging, and you might try to sit down and do this with one of your dolls. Sit down and catalog a doll. Actually describe it. When you come to these particular art character models from Cameron Reinhardt, you'll find that less is more. There's not a lot you can say about how the doll was painted, because their secret of the artistry of these dolls is that they were so pure and simple. They're absolutely wonderful. And then we have on this side the 114, which was one of the most popular dolls from the whole Art Character series, but it is so rarely ever found in this size. More typically, well, I've seen some as small as like 8 inches, and then you might find one in the 18-inch size, but you never find this grand size. And I have the 3 here so you can really see how the large size matters. Now, the maker, the actual porcelain maker of the Cameron Reinhardt dolls, after Cameron Reinhardt had their sculpt made and knew what they wanted to do, then they commissioned a porcelain firm to make their dolls. And that porcelain firm, to make the heads rather, and that porcelain firm was Simon and Halbig. Well, at the same time Simon Halbig was making dolls for Cameron Reinhardt and for other people, they also had a very rare and very small line of dolls that bear only their own name on the back. And they have, I want to move him out because he doesn't belong here right now. They had a series of 3 that were made, and it was called their 150 series. And there was the 150, 151, and 152. Again, size matters. Look at the modeling on this large doll. She is, this is one of my favorites in the collection. I love this face on her. I think she's beautiful. And I have to turn her around because when you see these braids, long looped braids, absolutely beautiful. An older child, more elongated face, and eyes like looking into the future. Look at her profile. Beautifully rounded nose, rounded chin, deep indentation around the eyes. And then her younger sister with this really cheerful, happy face. She said, well, when's my turn? But a really great character as well. And my favorite of all, the mother, the 152 mother by Simon and Halbig. And Mary Ann Cieslik is one of the most careful doll researchers that has ever existed in my mind. She is so particular. She never attributes anything or states anything until she is positive with documentation after documentation. And she has documented that this doll was made as a portrait of the Polish/German female reformist of the early 19th century who fought very, very hard for people's rights, women's rights, and was sadly executed at a young, or assassinated at a young age. Rosa Luxemburg, and I'm going to be showing you here a photograph of, an actual photograph of Rosa Luxemburg as a young woman, and honestly, you will believe, if you didn't have all of the other facts and information, you will believe just by looking at that the doll was designed as a portrait of Rosa Luxemburg. So a very, very wonderful doll for that reason. And finally, another major manufacturer, just have one here to show you, of the Art Character painted eye doll was Kestner. And they kind of moved out of it fairly quickly, but they did have a whole series of painted eye characters. And once again, I'm showing this fellow to you because this model is usually in a size like this. And to find it in this lovely large size allows this wonderful full expression. And I'm just looking at the back of him now, and this young lad won a big blue ribbon first prize in the Delaware Valley Doll Club of New Jersey in 1979. So he has resided in the home of Mary Lou Brite all of those 30, 40, well, 50, like 51 years, 50 years. He has resided in Mary Lou Brite's home, waiting to go on his journey to a new home.